Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan.
What happened?
I'm going to love this episode.
Why is that?
For all the accusations of me ranting, you're taking off on a brand today. And I'm looking forward to it. And I shall play the defense.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe. Yes, a little bit.
Let's let the audience know. Please
Okay.
start your case. What's the problem with Jaguar?
No, there's no problem. Actually, it's a case that has created and attracted a lot of opinions. A lot has been written about it and is still being written. It is fairly fresh. So I was reading about it, right? Now I understand that Jaguar is an old brand. In fact, one of the latest things that I read is that Tata leadership in Mumbai has summoned the entire Jaguar leadership to Mumbai. They've been flown here to explain what are they doing and what have they done, etc. And like a typical UK based subsidiary, they have, without keeping the headquarters informed, they have tried to do something, pull off a stunt on their own. But coming back, so like the brand is quite old and there's fair bit of history behind it. When I was reading, a lot of analysts are saying that Jaguar anyways was on an infinite road to nowhere.
As in because it was making losses and that's when Tata acquired
and it was not really, and even after that, it has not really been doing anything. It's just been there, right? So, but I thought that I don't want to analyze the Jaguar case end to end, a business case of it. I just thought that this gives us an opportunity to talk about rebranding, repositioning, and how they have gone about it.
Okay.
Right? That specific thing. And my reflection that when you're attempting something like this, what is the one aspect that becomes extremely critical? Yeah.
Okay.
Which, as the title indicates, is insight, right? Which in this case seems completely out of sight. So that is something that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. So let me put it this way. What are the successful rebranding exercises that you've seen in your career so far?
See, I was thinking about it, Sharan, and I think we have spoken about it in the past, right? Of brands that have seen an opportunity where their categories are declining or their categories are shifting and they have sort of changed their direction. We've also seen, for example, Cadbury evolve from chocolate for kids to chocolate for kids within you, the kid within you, right? Or Fruity from a drink for kids to, a mango based indulgence for youngsters, right? Fast Track from being a in your face brand for youth to something that stands for, stands ethics forward, value forward for the current generation, right? All of these brands have gone through a change in how they have tried to position themselves, or how they have consumers have perceived them over a period of time. I don't remember any successful drastic rebranding or completely relaunch sort of a brand. But I understand, and I've seen a lot of brands changing their perceptions, finding newer consumer set, or growing more affable to the current consumers over a period of time.
Right. You're saying it can't be drastic in one shot.
Maybe, but I don't know whether it can't be. I haven't seen any where somebody has. Do you remember any of this kind?
I remember one brand which was not very relevant in India. Maybe is Old Spice. Old Spice completely lost track of his audience at one point, right? And kind of took away. Old Spice was seen as the uncle brand. And then they used that itself to rebrand themselves, to make fun of themselves, to become a very, very funny, affable, engaging brand and youth, and broke away from that uncle mold. Yeah. That is one. But there are two aspects to this, right? One is the visual identity change, and second is the positioning change.
Yeah.
So the visual identity change, I've seen quite a few, and even some drastic ones. And Amazon keeps updating its app logo. Uber refreshed from that U to one power button and back to U. So there are Airbnb's change of brand identity from the time they started. It's pretty iconic. So visual identity is, in a way, easier to do. It is the positioning which kind of does not take well to drastic changes, because it means you are cutting off memory associations that you built so long to build memory associations afresh.
Fair.
Those
Fair.
are the
In fact,
difficult ones I've seen.
I would say, Sharan, I would not take sides on which parts of your identity are relatively easier to change. I would still say that every part of identity that you decide to touch and reposition, etc., should have some kind of a consumer reason, right? And therefore must have emerged from some kind of change in insights around your consumer or change in the consumer itself, right? Now, some of them might be so small that you know what you have changed, but the consumer doesn't know or doesn't care. I have looked through both the pieces of communication that Jaguar has put across.
Okay, the both meaning one is the ad or the preview that they released.
Yeah.
And the second
Yeah.
being?
So there was a 30-second commercial. Now I don't know what to call it because it just says bold, live unopposed, and live bold and stuff like that. It shows a lot of people dressed in colorful outfits, king poses,
Right.
and I don't know, doing nothing basically. And there was no mention of car or anything there. So there was this announcer of sorts that we are rebranding and all of that with the new Jaguar logo.
Right.
And there's this then the speech that you see at the Miami Art Festival by the chief creative officer of Jaguar, JLR, right? These are the two pieces that have been put out by them for public consumption, and I've seen both of them. Now, obviously, the first one possibly was just to pique interest, to create some controversy, create some talkability, etc. And they kept saying, wait for this particular date, right? Which is, I think, 5th or 6th December.
Okay.
When the Miami Art Fest, they had their slot, etc. Right?
Okay.
So that first one I can still understand was to get attention for the second one. And the second one is a fair amount of, at least an attempt from their side, to explain what they're doing.
That's okay, right? I thought I saw the video too, and I quite liked that how they were sticking to their guns.
That part is good. So just for the benefit of those who haven't seen that video, we will put the video link in our show notes. But in that 5-minute video, largely the chief creative officer, he talks about, he first starts off with his founder's philosophy. And the founder used to say, be brave, be fearless, copy nothing. Right? Which means you can be original, you should be original, etc. And he then explains what have they done with Jaguar, gives some design philosophy, etc. And then in the last, he says this, that he knows that this will create an identity that some people will like today, some people will like tomorrow, and some will never like. And that's okay. Right? I like
okay.
And they're okay with that. And that I love that line. Yeah. Because I think all the iconic brands have at one point or the other taken a position, knowing fully well that it will be dear to some people and some people will not like it at all, but they have stuck to their guns. If you don't like them, you don't like them. It's okay.
Perfect.
Right? Yeah. So it seems like the right thing to do. But at the surface, I was very happy. I was applauding them. But when I thought about it later, there are many problems that I see with them.
Okay. Bring on the charges. I'm ready with my defense.
So my first thing was that, it still didn't have cars. Right? They unveiled 2 demo models, 00 models, which are the concept cars. Now, these concept cars are never going to be made, or they will never be in the market, right? So,
that's
at the
but they will be bringing a car to the market in the next 2 years.
Hopefully, the next 2 years is a very long period of time, right? Then you do this event closer to the car launch, right? What you're doing is you're antagonizing today's consumer for the launch that you're going to do 2 years later, right?
See, I see a positive in that. I say a positive in that because there's a brand that's been losing money, and like you said, was on a road to nowhere. And when you're starved for cash, you'd rather pique interest. You'd rather create, disparate reactions so that you trigger people into engaging and talking about your brand. And that's a way to do it now, so that by the time a car launches, actually the people who can warm up to it will warm up to it. I'm okay. I just want to create the tension so that everybody hears about it. It's okay, right?
I still think that, in today's clutter, etc., you don't get such lead time, right? And therefore, you need to be mindful of when you are launching, what you're launching, etc. More importantly, see, the car is an emotional decision, is a high intent decision, right? So therefore, you're not talking anything about the engines or anything about the performance of the car, or just launching two new colors, London blue and Miami pink, saying that these will have big bold bonnets with those high lines and curves, etc., is fine. But without talking anything about the car, I'm not sure whether you're talking to the right kind of car enthusiasts, right? Or the sort of enthusiasts who have purchased Jaguar, right? The second piece, Sharan, is also that I heard that speech thrice. Unfortunately, nowhere does this person talk about anything about consumers, right? There is a thing around what the founders believe, and then there is a thing around this is what we are going to do.
Okay, I have a defense for
That's
that
it.
also.
Okay.
This is exactly why a designer should never be led to speak to public. Because they talk about the creative part and they forget about how to even present what they've made for the consumer. They don't look at their design as a consumable. That's I would call it more a tone deaf situation with the designer who presented. But I also have a defense with saying why there was no car in it. Because this is becoming an electric car market and they're moving electric, right? And for the main car enthusiasts and the people who bought the Jaguar or equivalent cars, it's always been about the engine, the noiselessness at speed, the luxury of it. But with electric cars, even the cheapest electric car is going to be noiseless. And it's going to be a smooth. So there's nothing that's going to differentiate enough. So the car is almost becoming standard, like the hardware of your phone. And it is what you do on top of it, which could be the most talk-worthy aspect of it.
So there is more to it, I'm sure. And there is, as a brand that has set the bar on innovation in the past, that has set the bar on design in the past, I'm sure they would have looked at more innovations. They would have done more innovations. But just this whole presentation, I think, was so poorly handled that they failed to address the core consumers, the change in needs of their consumers, or a new consumer segment that they're trying to unlock, which is also perfectly fine. And therefore, what are the various things in the car that sort of
appeals to the new audience,
that is crafted for the new audience, or that is crafted for new realities, right? That is something that they completely missed, is another miss for me.
Okay.
Which brings me to the core point that I was making earlier, that insight, right? Now, in our previous discussions, Sharan, we have spoken about consumers, different kind of consumers. So there is a core consumer that is giving you 70% of your today's business. And then there is SVC, strategic value consumer, a consumer which is supposed to give you 70% of your tomorrow's growth. For many brands, core consumer is the SVC, and which is fine. For a brand like this, it seems like they're talking to a different SVC. Yeah, which is good. But a brand can't be talking to an SVC without necessarily talking to their core consumers also. Now, in this communication entirely, I wasn't sure who they are actually talking to, right? They seem to be justifying that this is within the values of Jaguar. So they seem to be talking to their core consumers and asking them to accept the new Jaguar while trying to appeal to a wider audience, possibly.
I don't think they're appealing to a wider audience per se. Like I said, this is what I meant when I said your visual identity rebranding is a lot easier, in the sense people aren't necessarily repulsed by it in the long term. At first, they might have a jerk reaction to it, and then it settles down because the rest of the brand usually remains the same, and they learn to accept and live with the new identity. When you do the proposition rebranding, is when you're almost cutting your cord with the existing customers and you're trying to form new connections with new set of customers, or your customers are moved from one place to another, and this will be felt by people who haven't moved to the new place. For the new customers that they're trying to go after, they haven't just framed them yet. They have not called them out yet. If they did that, maybe it will make more sense. But it's very clear they're sticking to the brand ethos, but they are definitely moving away from the people who bought the Jaguar so far, is my guess, because all of us who are giving an opinion, I mean, most of us have not really owned a Jaguar. We've been fans of the brand, but not consumers of the brand.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
For the brand consumers, it could be a jerk, but it's almost like saying, wake up to the new sensibilities. If not, you'll get left behind, and so be it.
Let's see. I'm just hoping that what they are doing is understood by their consumers. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not their consumer, but I was unfair. I thought it was unfair to not address the core consumers directly, right? Acknowledge their contribution, acknowledge their presence, etc., while doing this completely. Right? I think when a brand attempts like something like this, it must lead with an insight. It must lead with its consumers. It must lead with its current consumers, their insight, reconciliation with that, and possibly a track that says that these are the new consumers we are wanting to appeal to, and this is how they think. Right? I would believe that will be the logical way of approaching a change like this, versus putting up something which says this is who I want to be now. You guys decide whether you like it or not.
Yeah, true. I largely agree with what he's saying. There must be an insight. In my attempt at being the devil's advocate and trying to defend the brand, it is also prudent to see what else comes out of it, because the marketing hasn't spoken, the consumers haven't been identified or even spoken to. It's been more corporate conversations so far, and LinkedIn is the worst place to judge a brand. And if you want to make a good, insightful brand communication, the worst people to ask are fellow marketers. Because marketers have so much more logical thinking than consumers do, that the advice is never really right. So we've seen so many ads coming out, even from Cadbury House, where we've loved the ads internally, but they just don't work with consumers. And some ads that we think it's so off-brand, consumers lap it up. So that can happen.
That's true. And in fact, if any of our listeners searches Jaguar new relaunch, etc., on internet, you will find significant number of videos of, and this is a big thing for Britishers. This is a British brand, a legacy one. Just look at the news coverage it is getting. They're talking to consumers. All consumers seem very disappointed. So the verdict is out there. It has been significantly panned by consumers and experts alike. But the whole, the idea is not to tell them that the consumers are not liking it, etc. For all of us marketers, I'm just trying to see what are the lessons that we can draw from this, and how is it that one can approach this differently. And the only thing I would possibly submit, Sharan, is that what is not visible to us should hopefully be there, is that one must lead with an insight or the change in an insight and attempt to engage the consumers while announcing the relaunch or while announcing a change in direction. Somehow that ought to be one of the first things that you do, and it somehow has gotten missed or seems missed in this entire communication that they've put out.
No, absolutely. Because going back to the British identity you're speaking of, right? So being a British brand has been core to the Jaguar forever. And now they probably want to go global, and being British may not be accessible to this global audience. Therefore, they are in a dilemma of how much of the Britishness to keep and how much to let go of. Again, a different point.
Let's see. The jury is still out there. I would just say that this is a clear case, seems like a clear case of brand chasing something new, something elusive, wanting to completely reinvent itself while losing sight of, I think, the possibly the insight.
True. So if you look at Apple when they present design, so not when Steve Jobs presented design, he always presented design with the functionality or the utility of the design.
Correct.
To justify it, saying this is why it is and it looks so cool, it's almost a bonus. The look so cool is not the primary delivery. But after Steve Jobs, when Apple did away with the headphone jack. They said, we're doing it because we're courageous. That's how stupid it was. That it saved the money is why everybody else copied. Sadly, so far what we've seen of Jaguar is following the second version of the Apple presentation, with leading design first into the conversation without being insight first, where while I am agreeing with you, despite after all my defense, I agree with what you say.
No, very great example, Sharan. I think it is something that marketers must remember and something that we can really learn from. Thank you for sharing this.
Awesome. And thank you for the antagonistic episode today.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net.